Thanks for your patience on this.
Mhm.
I think I can hear you now.
All right, you can hear me?
Yes.
All right, look at that. Solving technical problems to start off with. So thank you all for being here. Welcome to HFC's CareCon. My name is Matthew, and my co-presenter today is Daniel. And we'll have an opportunity to speak to you guys today about hard topics for planning ahead. So we have about 20 folks here, which is amazing. I'll share a little overview of what we're going to cover. I'll talk through the agenda and then we'll get into it. So Daniel and I are new acquaintances. We just met a couple weeks ago after the team at HFC introduced us, and we're really excited to share with you some of the things that we've learned from each other and things that are similar. And part of what we were asked to do is to share our personal experiences and how we've helped our families prepare for long-term dementia caregiving. And the two next bullets, hopefully you all walk away with some practical insights and key takeaways to help you feel more empowered and prepared. And some of the things that we'll talk about are housing considerations, long-term care, meaning what are we going to do in the long term as diseases like Alzheimer's or other dementia progress, powers of attorney, advance directives, and that should say end of life wishes and more. So we do ask that you all participate. We have our chat available, and if you have any questions, if you want to take yourself off of mute, I'm just going to make sure everybody right now is muted, if you don't mind to start with. I'm just going to do that to save some background noise, but feel free to take yourself off of mute and interject. We want this to be interactive for everybody, so feel free to do that. So with that in mind, I'm going to share a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We've got 40 minutes. Daniel and I are going to share a little bit about our journeys in becoming caregivers, benefits of different paths that each of us took, and why our paths might work for you or why they may not. Part of what we want to emphasize is that there is no right path. It really depends upon your situation and your needs. And we just want to paint a picture of what that could look like. Some of the key factors to success and how you can prepare for a journey like caregiving, how to manage expectations and have some of the hard conversations, getting affairs in order and what that means specifically from a legal and financial perspective. And then lastly, some pro tips from real caregivers, which are me and Daniel. So we want to make sure you guys walk away with some ideas on what you can do. So as I mentioned, Daniel and I are newly acquainted thanks to HFC connecting us. What we found is that we have a lot of things in common. So I'll start with those. So first off, both of us live in Southern California. I live in San Diego and Daniel lives outside of LA. We're both business owners and we're both caregivers for our fathers who are living with dementia. Part of the key topic that we want to talk about is having the hard conversations. And as we got to know each other, we realized that one of the harder conversations we both had was with our mothers about moving away from the current place that they were living earlier in their dementia journey. And so we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about kind of how our paths diverged there. And then also, as I noted there, both of our parent families ended up moving to manage some of the care. So Daniel, I will pass it off to you to share a little bit about yourself and get started with sharing a little bit about your caregiving journey.
Thank you so much, Matthew. So my journey started actually only 3 years ago, but my dad was diagnosed 10 years ago with Alzheimer. The process of his steps were managed by my mom. She was his main caregiver, with one issue. They were 15 hours away from us in a flight, pretty much the other part of the world. So everything was okay. till my mom got to in a position that she could not take care of it anymore. She got into a very, very deep depression, like many caregivers are, with no support. And we really had to have a tough conversation, as Matthew mentioned before, and say, Mom, I feel really not comfortable with you giving that away, but who I am to judge? I'm 15 hours away. So after talking with my wife, we agreed that the right thing to do morally to our family, to every aspect of our emotions and our meaning in life was to bring them to live with us. Obviously, taking my mom from a place she lives together with my dad was not an easy process, and we had to convince her and make sure that we painting a beautiful picture for her. And so we did. We were able to convince her that is the right move, and we started we started the process. In this case, it was also immigration. I'm not going to get into it, but the bottom line is 2 days before I'm actually on a flight to pick them up, a fire broke in our house and the entire house got burned. Now I'm reminding you, we built a whole unit for them. We created their separate space. We did not have intention to really live with them. Um, but a fire is not something you control. And we decided to continue with our process and still bring them with us. So we kind of schlep between hotels and rentals and houses. And what pretty much brought me to a place that I became an immediate caregiver for my dad. So from building a career, totally be not connected to any caregiver element, I became a full caregiver to my dad with no separation, living with my parents in the same house, with no boundaries, with no walls. And it really kind of showed me what it is to take care of an Alzheimer person. Um, Fast forward 2 years and a half after, we were able to complete our house, to build a fantastic multi-generational home. But I was very lucky to understand what it means to take care of him and what it means to save my parents. And that is the whole purpose and the whole point of multi-generational living. I felt that we're hitting on many, many different buckets. So first of all, my dad is not going to any institute that could not, even if it's the best institute in the world, they cannot give the same compassion and love and support that I am there physically, emotionally, and personally are there. Um, However, again, this is not an easy process, but it's extremely, extremely meaningful one. Um, I can also mention that throughout this process, not only we saved dad, we also saved mom. Mom from being extremely depressed, she just wanted to finish her life. She could not see the light in the end of the tunnel. Now she's next to her grandchildren. She cooks for them. She's happy. She has meaning to her life. She wants to live many, many more years. If you talk to her 5 years ago, she would say, give me a pill and I will gladly die right now. So I saved mom. And I'm feeling also that I'm raising very compassionate kids that live with grandma and grandpa, that see what is Alzheimer firsthand. And yes, it's a bit scary for them at the beginning, but in the end of the day, we created a strong, bonded family, compassion kids, happy parents. And for me and my wife, this is our life mission today. We're making sure they'll be happy, content, and have everything that they need. And they do. So this is the multi-gen option to take care of Alzheimer dad. And again, for me, it worked well. I understand that this is not the solution for everybody, but for the one that considering it, I'll be here to kind of explain what are the things that are needed. Matthew, take it from here.
You've got it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to move to the slide that shares a little bit. So Daniel, would you mind just sharing a little bit about some of the pictures that you included here of your multi-generational housing?
Yeah, so the star of those pictures is my dad. He's our model, and we obviously in each and one of those pictures, and one when we celebrate one of our kids' birthday, and you see the constant compassion and affection that he received from his grandchildren, from his kids, from his entire family. So that's just several houses that we've been through this process. That's why you see the kind of a different staging. But that's because, again, we lived in three different houses, one hotel, till we actually moved to our burned house. So
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And for me, my caregiving journey with my father started in 2017. So about 7 years ago, as I mentioned earlier, I'm living in Southern California, and my mother and my father are living in Virginia. So a couple pictures you see here, somewhat small, but you can see my father sitting with my mother, enjoying some pumpkin pie, sitting outside in his community, and then also me with my parents celebrating their 45th wedding anniversary last fall. So, um, as Daniel and I shared, the conversations that we actually had with our mothers about the care that was needed for our fathers was one of the more challenging conversations that each of us identified. And again, we took different paths where Daniel's family has ended up in a multi-generational home. And for me, my father is living in a memory care community. And for us, deciding that the memory care community was the right approach was really a joint conversation that we had with my parents. My parents had lived in a multi-story home for 30 years. Falls is a big risk in homes. And so we knew that something was going to need to change, that their living situation in that particular property would probably not be sufficient. And so as we looked at options, we also considered one-story homes and many other things, but the memory care was where we ended up deciding. My mother is a registered nurse. She had actually previously worked at the community that my father and she are now living in. And so that gave us some comfort. And I'll talk about acclimating somebody to a new community a little bit later in the presentation. But again, part of what we want to share with you all is some of those conversations coming from kids to our parents. That's a challenging thing and something that we both experienced. We want to share some of our insights and tips in terms of how we approach that. But we do want to talk a little bit about the housing decisions that we made in detail to help paint pictures of different paths that you could take, or maybe that you have taken, and other things that you might consider as you're going down that particular aspect of your journey. So Daniel, if you can go ahead and share some of your thoughts on multi-gen living and some of the benefits that you've seen, that would be fantastic.
absolutely. So on a multi-generational living, the first and probably the foremost part is the emotional support. Again, this is not just about the person who got the Alzheimer. It is about his wife or her husband. It is about the family. So when the family get together, live together, support each other, the emotional support level is just unreal. They feel that emotional support. And if you look at all the stages of Alzheimer, this is definitely something that is extremely important for Alzheimer patients. Cost efficiency. I mean, this is a reality in which you share cost, you share responsibility. Everything is being shared. So just the bottom line, this is a fantastic financial decision because it's not hard, not on us and not on our parents, because we share the burden. Familiar environment, especially for Alzheimer patient, they feel and they need to feel comfortable that they're surrounded by the people that they know and they feel comfortable with. So that's just all those things that help Alzheimer patients. Improved supervision and safety. I mean, all time, all day long, there are set of eyeballs on my dad. If it's the kids, if it's my wife, it's me, it's my mom, the caregiver that comes a few hours a day. So we definitely have full control on his safety. And as Matthew mentioned before, the falling is the big catastrophe. People are not aware of the statistics of how terrible it is. And it's not even related to Alzheimer. That people just fall from a certain age. And having that improved supervision helps a lot. The enhancement of quality of life. I mean, he's surrounded by his grandchildren. What can be better than that? It helps. It literally helps. There are researchers that said it helps. So that is fantastic. And again, The family is extremely bonded, extremely strong, and that is something, it's a value that we take with us forever.
Yeah, so hopefully as you're looking at this slide, you're seeing that there are a lot of similarities that both Daniel and I feel that in his family's decision and my family's decision, that there are kind of echoing benefits and differences in benefits as well. And part of what we want to continue to emphasize in this conversation with everyone is that it's important to have conversations with your loved ones about what's important to them. You know, there are finances involved, there are other responsibilities involved, there's time commitments involved. So all those play into what makes the most sense for you. And again, our position is that there's really no right answer. And so from my perspective, with my father living in a memory community, the specialized support where there's trained staff who understands dementia to a large degree, and there are folks 24/7 looking out for him, is something that gives my mother peace of mind, as well as me and the rest of my family peace of mind. The environment, and this is really important to pay attention to, it's designed for folks with memory issues. There are specific design standards that can be implemented in physical places, and this can also happen in your home, but to help somebody understand how to navigate more effectively. Same way with Daniel, I feel like we have improved supervision and safety, particularly with things like medication management, which can get incredibly challenging as medications may increase over the course of a disease. There's an enhanced quality of life. Specifically, there is a fair amount of socialization that occurs within the memory community. My father's community includes about 20 other folks, and they are interacting, they are singing together, they are coloring together, they're doing lots of things that really help improve that quality of life. Again, kind of the specialized care and understanding the different stages of dementia. I had a conversation with my mother this morning, and my father is exhibiting some unique and strange behaviors that my mother is not aware of. But one of the staff ladies has seen it once before in her experience and kind of shared a little bit of that perspective. So that specialized experience and specialized care can be beneficial as well. And then this one has been particularly important for my mother. And I think Daniel would also agree that the respite time that his mom is feeling at home and his saving his mom, my mother was really feeling like she needed to supervise my father 24/7 and sleeping with one eye open to make sure that he's not getting out of where they're living or creating issues, that she is now able to sleep through the night a lot better than she had in the past. And she's able to spend more time taking care of herself. So hopefully, again, you guys can see similarities in terms of benefits and continue to understand that there's not necessarily a right approach if a housing consideration is something that you're having hard conversations about right now. And then Daniel, I'll hand it back to you to talk about some of the factors that were and are important to success for multi-generational living.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, again, we all understand that living together with several families, cultures, gaps of generations, it's a challenging thing. There's financial things, there's home modification stuff. So all those things, all those conversations have to be done, have to be clarified, and we have to make sure that everybody on the same page. Otherwise, you know, you're putting yourself into so much of investment emotionally, financially, just to break it if it doesn't work. So on the home part, I mean, it's extremely important to make sure that senior living, no matter if it's my mom or my dad, so there are some safety features that have to be implemented in a house. Bathroom upgrades is the place where most people fall and hurt themselves. So you got to install grab bars. You got to make sure there's proper lighting. You got to make sure that, you know, there is a floor that is suitable, not a carpet, something that is slip resistant, making the proper adjustment to more mirrors and more ability to really help them to navigate through the day. And again, in this case, it's not just about dad that has Alzheimer, but it's also mom that is taking care of him. Kitchen and adjustments and making sure that you have all your ducks in a row and identify again what is important to the current stage. So it really depends if it's stage 1 or 2 or 3, or it's the final stages where there is hospice that needs to be involved. So according to that, again, you got to make sure that the doors are wide. I'll give you an example. Our house did not really have much access except the main door that had a step. So we literally took many, many windows and dropped them down all the way to the floor to create a wide entrance. So today, my dad can go with his wheelchair. I mean, he's being pushed to the with a wheelchair, but he can have an easy access to our home, to his unit. And again, those things are extremely important. So that's on the technical side. And if you want to go there, you got to make sure that you're talking to the right people, to a CAPS certified individual that really understand what are the right suggestions and what really need to be implemented versus just go on to a contractor that can do any kind of job. You really need that level of understanding of your true situation. And then there is the family rules. Then there is the fact that you bring all the family together, and there's always going to be friction. It's just the nature of us as human. So it's extremely important to establish those boundaries. And I'm not talking now about privacy. I'm talking about literally things to do and not to do. Judgment to be the first one that is easy to indicate. You cannot judge. You are dealing here with a different generation, with a different mindset. You cannot come and say, hey, I think you should raise your kids differently, for instance. That's a big no-no. So again, establish the barrier, communicate it openly, and regularly. This is something that always need to be on the table. If something bothers, put it on the table, talk. Never let things drag and stay in your belly to explode in a certain way. Respect the differences, respect the fact that we're different generations, that we are not coming from the same place. Set financial expectations. Who's paying on what? Every situation, every multifamily is totally different. There are the ones that the kids are more financially stable. There are situations that the parents are more financially stable. So it's just having the understanding, the agreement. Maybe we need to sell one property in order to move to another. Maybe we need to invest. Again, there is a lot of solutions, but it depends on the situation. Privacy is huge. I had the privilege to have no privacy with my parents for several years, but it taught me what it has to teach me, and that's why I feel very, very privileged and very lucky to share with you that. I don't think that if I had full separation with them, I would feel that. And we celebrate together. While there is a separation space, and each one of them have their space, we definitely making sure there is full interaction. There's dinner every night. My kids never had dinner every night. So today they have dinner every night. We're really creating that celebration together. And it's been heaven on earth. Just make sure that you do not forget to touch those major, major parts.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And just as a reminder, everybody, feel free to take yourself off of mute or to add any questions that you have in the chat. We'd love to hear from you as we continue to share some of our experiences. And then from my perspective, with my father living in a memory community, it's really two categories. One is, how do you actually go about selecting a community to live in? And then secondly, what is ongoing support and what does that take to be successful? So as I've mentioned a few times, having conversations about individual preferences and individual needs, also assessing financial situations. As Daniel mentioned, there are cost implications to enhance the home to be multi-generational. And then there are also cost implications of being in a memory community. What can you afford and what do you want to afford? Those are important things that you want to understand as you start planning for future living. Additionally, understanding how well the staff is trained. Do they receive dementia training or Alzheimer's training? I would strongly suggest that if you're considering moving into a community, to have personal conversations with residents and those that are visiting to better understand how good the quality is at the facility and whether it again meets the needs and preferences that you have. And then one other thing that I think is really important, and I think this applies to both of our situations, something that Daniel and I talked about is there are great facilities called adult daycare centers who research shows that if you're supporting somebody with dementia and you want to eventually move them into a nursing center or a memory community, that having them into the routine of going out of the home and socializing actually helps the adaptation when they move into that community. And so on selecting a community, what I would suggest is to become very familiar. And if you're not living there yet, are there events that you can attend there so that you can become familiar with the facility and the folks that are there? And just to share an example, my parents moved to the facility that they're living in just a little over 4 years ago. My father is in late stages, and recently he was in the emergency room and he could not tell the doctor who I was. He knew that my mother was his wife, but couldn't tell the doctor, my mother's name. And when asked where he was, he actually named the facility that he lived in, which was wrong. But it's interesting to me that, as we've tried to acclimate him and get him into the community before he needed to be there, that has kind of been ingrained in his mind, and that familiarity provides a sense of comfort and peace for him. In terms of ongoing support, as I mentioned earlier, I am a business owner. I didn't mention, but I used to work at a Fortune 500 company and manage a large number of people. And so the way that I view the staff at the community is that they're really my family, and that if I have good relationships with the staff and my mother has good relationships with the staff, that they're going to take care of my father and they're going to help him out. So I really view them as kind of an extension of our family who have the eyes and ears on my father. My mother will take snacks and treats to the staff. She knows everybody by name. We get to understand their stories and why they're working where they do. And so I really encourage you, if you go down that route, to really treat the staff as your family. I'd also say that being kind and being firm, there's certain expectations that my family and I have for the care that my father is provided. And I would say probably 9 times out of 10, those expectations are met. And I think it's really important to hold the staff accountable and be kind and firm when that doesn't happen. What are the things that could have been different? Can we seek to understand what the challenges were in providing that 1 out of 10 times where it could be different in the future? And then the last thing I would say is have grace. The team that is helping to support my father, they are humans just like I am and just like my mother is. I know for sure that if I were living with my father, that I would not be able to provide him top-notch care every single day of my life. And so as I view the interactions with the staff and the things that they're doing, I approach it with grace to make sure to understand that they are human as well. Even though they have a job and they're being compensated for a job, they're human and they have things going on in their life. So again, treating them like they're my family and looking out for ways to support them is important. So I actually want to pause here. We have a couple other things that we want to talk about. Andrea, I see that you have a note in chat, so I'm just going to read that out loud real quickly. So if one sibling can manage arranging a multi-generational living situation, how do you prevent feelings of resentment, guilt, etc., among the siblings who have not or who have the multi-generational home and those who don't? So great question. Daniel, do you want to take the first crack at that one?
What a fantastic question. So first and foremost, when you're doing the right thing, you are doing the right thing. So at least in my situation, obviously, I also have a sibling. She could not do it. And it's not that there was a fight and who's going to take care of my parents. It wasn't there. It was just, I just pull up my sleeves and I jump into it without even necessarily thinking how it's going to affect her or how will it affect anybody else within my family. I just want to save my parents. So I think that, again, when you're doing the right thing and you fully believe in that, this by itself resolve a lot of maybe your bad feeling or feeling that again your siblings are not in a good position. Secondly, you should definitely talk to them. You should definitely express to them exactly what you're doing. And this is, on one hand, a big privilege. On the other hand, this is not easy job. This is a very tough one. It's a job that requires from you, as Matthew said, I mean, he cannot fully take care of his parents. Well, we as a family fully take care of our parents. So I can tell you at least that I had that conversation with my sister that initially probably felt a little bit kind of guilt, maybe resentment, but I made sure that she understand that what I'm doing is not to put her on the side and say, hey, I'm the best son to taking care of, but I am actually focusing on, hey, inclusive, she should be part of it. So if there are tough conversation, she's involved, even though she's not part of the family, the core nuclear family, she's definitely involved. So if you can include your siblings in this process, if you can make them feel comfortable, that is great. But that's not what's important. What's important is the life of your parents and the fact that you can give them the compassion, the support, and the love that no institute can. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. And again, appreciate the question and the engagement. So we've got about 10 minutes left and we have 3 more slides to cover. So want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that both of us think that you can approach having hard conversations. So again, Daniel, if you could kick off and share details specifically around the housing side of things, that would be great.
Absolutely. So again, I kind of covered before the whole family rules and all that involved. And again, it's kind of breakdown, and all of them are tough conversation. None of them is a easy conversation to set up the rule, to set up the boundaries. If somebody crossed the boundaries, make sure that you acknowledge them and you're doing it in a nice way. So again, having those rules is extremely hard conversation in some cases. The financial contributors and the budgeting, again, every situation is a bit different, but the money is a very sensitive thing, by the way, especially when it gets to the siblings. So you got to make sure that you really have those conversations, that you cover every expectation, even if in some situation there is a legal document that should be created. There are specialists for that cases. In my case, again, no legal or financial. I took on myself the remodeling of the unit because I understand that this is going to be a fantastic investment in the future. So it was on me. However, again, we are splitting costs. We are really living our life in a shared family. So the budgeting has been very organically, at least in our case. Privacy and personal space, again, it's kind of mentioned in the family rules, but that's, again, the key success. I can tell you that from the moment that we moved and created that separation, our family feel much, much better than any situation before where we lived in one house. So privacy and personal space, it's also maybe become a tough conversation because let's say my mom just comes into our apartment or to our house unannounced and we are like in the middle of something. So there is really important conversation that needs to be done about the privacy and the personal space both ways, my space and their space. Matthew.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And then from my perspective, having hard conversations, as we mentioned at the beginning, some of the hard conversations we both had was about these living arrangements. And I would say that these pieces of advice that I have are not only relevant to living situations, but to other situations that may come up throughout your caregiving journey. So choosing the right time and the right place to have the conversation is really important. Obviously a private space, when emotions aren't high, those are really important. Just to share some insight on the experience that I had when we were talking about my parents moving out of their home that they had lived in for 30 years and moving into the community. There was a point where my siblings and I stopped talking to my parents about it because we realized we were pushing too hard. That happened in June of 2019. And without continuing to talk about it, by November of 2019, my parents were then living in the community. And so my reflection on that as I was really not meeting my parents where they were in the journey. And so trying to focus on where I can meet them and having the conversations in the right time and place is important. Also, would encourage you to listen twice and speak once. What are the real challenges and issues to what you may think is best and what is being reciprocated, whether that's a partner or a spouse or a friend that you're talking to? Um, I would also encourage you to start the conversations sooner rather than later. I put this quote here that the cold water doesn't get warmer if you jump late. So it's going to be hard, and I use that in quotations, whether you talk about it now or you talk about it later, and just approaching it with that grace and the two opportunities to listen and speaking once is really important. And I'd also just share that many things can feel hard at first, but we all get through our hard situations. We've lived through all the hard situations that we've had in our lives. And so really think about how you can tackle some of those things that are hard in your mind. One other important area to kind of bring us back together are things that we really feel are important for you to get in order, regardless of the housing situation. You heard Daniel talking earlier about conversations about finances and how important that was from a multi-generational home perspective. For me as well, I mentioned it when trying to make a decision on where to live, you need to understand your finances. These are really some important things that we would both suggest that you have in your mind as you are providing care as a caregiver. So, do you have the right powers of attorney in place, both a financial and medical power of attorney that allows for you to act on behalf of the person that you're caring for? Advance directives and end of life wishes are really important, especially if the person that you're caring for is losing their cognitive ability. I'll just speak to this again from my own experience that with my father's recent ER visits, determining what to do and how to approach his care, going back and looking at what he wanted to happen in some of his advanced directives, and working with my mother to do that. And then also things that were important to him at the end of his life were really important. A very specific thing that I'll share is that my father is a very generous person. He would like to donate his brain to science when he passes away. And that was something that he talked to my family about, but it was something that my mother actually didn't remember. And so when we went back and looked at some of these documents that we had in place, it was very clear that that was something that he wanted to do. So obviously, as a caregiver, there's a lot going on, and having some of this documentation and understanding what needs to happen and how it needs to happen in a way that makes sense can be really important. So caregivers do share that taking steps to ensure that your affairs are in order will put your mind at rest. And I would just offer one of the companies that I'm very fortunate to work with. My co-founder Christian is actually on the call. Is called Care Virtue, and we've been sponsored by the National Institutes of Health to help create a software that helps people plan for some of these things, both from a legal and financial perspective. And we currently have a paid opportunity to participate in utilizing our technology. So if you're interested and you feel like you're not as confident as you want to be in terms of having your affairs in order, please reach out to me at the end of this conversation. I'm happy to help connect you with our research team to see if it's something that you qualify for. And Daniel, I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to share any thoughts you had on this slide as well.
Yes, absolutely. We have only 5 minutes, so I will move to the next slide because I truly think that you covered very, very nicely. Um, living in a multi-generational home, and all in all, to be in a caregiver situation, you really must establish and keep the right mindset. And when I'm talking about a mindset, I think that my biggest mindset that me, my family, and everybody around us has a very deep meaning of taking care of our parents. And as long as this goal is clear and you are full of meaning and you understand that what you're doing is not a burden, but it's a privilege. It's something that was given to you not for you to complain, not for you to say how miserable my life is, but it's a challenge. And life is hard and life is full of friction, and that is one of them. So I can tell you that even though my journey has been extremely challenging, it's also been extremely meaningful. And I probably find myself and my family in the happiest moment that we have. In addition to that, we have our humor. And when you are sharing a space with an Alzheimer, now stage 7 individual, you have to use your humor. You have to laugh, you know. And if my dad decide to dress up with my wife's clothes and showing us a fantastic fashion show, we're not going to look and say, "Oh my God, he lost his brain. It's so sad." We're cracking up. If my wife bathing my dad and he's cursing her in Russian and she doesn't even understand the language, it cracks us up. When my kids are in shock of what's going on, that is hilarious. Hence the place that we are all here for, you know, hilarity for charity. Humor is definitely helping to connect my family together, create the meaning of everything that we do together. It connects us. It connects us to my mom. It connects me to my kids. So meaning and humor, I mean, there is nothing that I can reinforce more than establishing this mindset. Matthew.
Great, thank you. And my pro tip is for you to share your story with others. For me personally, I've learned a lot from other caregivers and connecting with them over the past 7 years as my father has been going through this journey and living with Alzheimer's. They have given me a lot of pro tips as I have shared what's happening in my life. One of my really good friends lives in Tennessee. She just lost her mother to dementia about 6 months ago, and she gave me an incredible pro tip after she lost her mother that has helped my family more effectively manage the end of life for my father. And so HFC has tremendous support groups that are available for you to participate in. They are fantastic support groups. And so that's one way you can connect and share your story. But I would really encourage you to share what's going on so that you can learn from others who are going through similar things and give you advice and perspective on some of the things that you might be facing as a caregiver. And so wanted to share last thing, just our contact information. So Daniel at multigen.com and Matthew at carevirtue.com. If there is anything that either one of us can do individually to help you in your caregiving journey, we would love to hear from you and chat with you and share more of our experiences. And so with that, and with 2 minutes left, we'll see if there's another question or two that we could take from you. Maria, go right ahead. Yes, please.
Okay, I think this was all so informative. Thank you very, very much. In my situation, my husband was diagnosed at 51. He's now 59 at stage 6C. And when he was diagnosed, I had a middle school and high schooler. So I don't have the issue of siblings who are, you know, in between this in terms of my decisions and so on. But rather I have young, 20-something-year-olds, early 20-something-year-olds who are his daughters, my daughters as well, who don't really have the bandwidth for these conversations.
Sure.
I get that meeting them where they are, but there's that anxiety in me that where we are is going to come very quickly. So I think that's a kind of a reverse challenge, I guess, in some ways. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that with everybody. Sorry that you're going through that. And yeah, I think my experience again, kind of the reverse is the capacity for my mother to have the conversations. And what I would say is that again, listening twice and speaking once is just understand and ask questions. I tend to use a lot of open-ended questions, meaning questions that don't have a yes or no answer. Questions like, how are you feeling about things? I had a conversation with my mom again today. She shared with me a couple of days ago that She thinks my father is afraid of dying, and I asked her if she was afraid of his dying. And just got her to start sharing some of her thoughts about that. And then based off what she shared, I could give her advice. And so my advice to you, Maria, would be sharing some of the things maybe that you're going through and just asking some simple questions of how they're feeling about the situation and see how much they give you that you can work with, and pay close attention, because it's probably really hard for them seeing their father and mother go through what you're going through. And I can only imagine how hard it is for you to try and connect with them when you feel like they don't have some of the capacity to take that on. Daniel, do you have any thoughts there? Oh, if you can unmute Daniel.
Yes, I do
There you
have the
go.
thoughts, but unfortunately we're like 2 minutes away back to the lobby. They kind of
Yep,
shut
kicking
us
us out.
down.
Okay,
But I love the way you answered, and I fully support
okay.
your
And
answer.
Maria, feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to share more of our thoughts with you
Absolutely.
individually as well. Well,
All right,
thank you all
thank
so
you.
much for
Thank you,
attending
everybody.
HFC's CareCon and today's conversation.
Thank you all.
Take care,
We
everybody.
encourage you to move to the lobby, to the main lobby right now. They're kind of recapping everything. So thank you.